If you're talking, Baruch, we don't hear you.
Do you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, sorry. Okay, today's daf is Masechta Sanhedrin Daf Ayin Vav, and we will begin on Daf Ayin Vav Amud Aleph, 5 lines from the top. I Mahu Kalasa Asura. So the Gemara just went before and said on yesterday's page, it says, and on Ayin Hey Amud Beis, it says, Minayin Lasa She'er Haba Mimeno Kishe'er Haba Mimeno. In other words, the man is, you compare the man to the male to female. In other words, what does that mean? The male is like the female, just like a husband. The Torah tells us that he's usher on his wife's, on his stepdaughter. Let's say he married a woman, she had a daughter, and that daughter had another daughter. So you're usher to have relations with that stepdaughter and the stepdaughter's daughter, okay, or the stepson's daughter. That's usher. How do you know that we come? So that's relatives related to his wife's side. So we say, just like you're usher on relatives related to your wife's side, you're also usher on relatives related to your side, which means that if a person has a daughter, the Gemara says that if a person has a daughter, hi Sheldon, we just began.
Okay.
Gemara just says that if a person has a daughter, but it's not through marriage, he raped somebody, and it's called anusa, and he has a daughter, so he'll be usher on that daughter as well. In other words, he can't marry that daughter or have relations with that daughter, just like he's not allowed to have isser with his stepdaughter. So this is a relation, that daughter is related through him, and the stepdaughter is related through his wife, just like the relations through your wife, you're usher. So the relations through you, you are also usher. That's what the Gemara said before. So the Gemara wanted to say, if you're always saying that, then I'll have something else to tell you. The Gemara says right over here in the middle of the page, on Ein Hayom Beis, the Gemara is going to say a question. Okay, so what else is a person usher because of his wife? He's usher on his mother-in-law, and he's usher on, imagine your mother-in-law's mother. You're usher on that. So therefore, one would say that therefore, if you're always saying that whatever comes through your wife, you'll apply that through your own relatives. So then you would say that midoraisa, a person's usher on his own grandmother, just like you're usher on your wife's grandmother. So also you're usher on your own grandmother. But that's not true. That is not true. A midoraisa, a person can have relations with his grandmother, his mother's mother. So why is that so? That's what the Gemara wanted to know. So the Gemara says, Amar Abaya said, Amar Kro, there was a pasuk that says, Imchehi, you only usher to have relations with your mother, but you're not usher to have relations with your aim imoy, with your mother's mother. So your grandmother, midaraisa, is permitted to you. And Rabbi had another reason why to say, your grandmother's usher to you. Now, we go on Ayin Vav Amud Aleph, and by the same logic, the Gemara is going to say, okay, so let's compare the woman to your own relatives. Let's say a man, he's usher on his daughter-in-law. So I'm going to say that just like you're usher on your own daughter-in-law, right? You can't marry your own daughter-in-law. Even after the son dies, a man can't marry his daughter-in-law. So also you're usher on your stepson's wife. Let's say a man married and had a stepson, took in a stepson. That stepson's wife should be usher, because we're always comparing whatever you're usher to yourself, you're usher on your wife's family. Whatever is usher on your wife's family is usher to yourself. So that's the Gemara's question. And that's not true. If a person's stepsons died, he's allowed to marry his stepson's wife, former wife. So the Gemara says, why is that so? So let's read it. Imahu, I involve him in the Aleph, 5 lines from the top. Imahu, kalasa, just like by yourself, a man is not allowed to marry his kalosoi, his daughter-in-law. It's interesting, we call a daughter-in-law a kala, because maybe you have to treat her like as if she just got married, no matter how long she's married. Afi, so also her, kalasa esura. One's going to say that your wife's daughter-in-law, that means your stepson's wife, should also remain usher to you. Amar Abaya said, Amakra, because there's a pasuk that says, Eishus binchehi. You're not allowed to marry your daughter-in-law because it's the wife of your son. Bincha, it's your son. So therefore, so the Torah said it like a miut, and it says mishum eishus bincha atamachayva. You're only held liable for having relations with the wife of your son. But you're not going to be held liable mishum eishus bina, the wife of her son. In other words, the wife of your stepson. So the wife of your stepson is mutter to you. And Rava says basically the same idea as Abaya, but he says I don't even need that pasuk eishus bin chehi, because it wouldn't make sense to say that a person should be usher on his stepdaughter-in-law, because Rava Amar whenever you have a gzeira shava, you go 100% into a gzeira shava, and everything about the gzeira shava tells you that you do it, you apply everything from the malame, the teacher, to the lilmoid, to the nilmad, the one that's being taught. And there's an opinion like that. When you learn a gzeira shava, you only take one thing out of the gzeira shava, but you refit it to the place that you're learning it to. This whole gzeira shava doesn't make sense. Again, there was a gzeira shava that said that you compare his relatives to her relatives and her relatives to his relatives. But still, you would never come to the conclusion that your stepdaughter-in-law should be usher to you, just like your own daughter-in-law is usher to you. According to the opinion that says that you learn a gzeira shava 100%, when you have a gzeira shava, so then how would I play this whole thing out? So there's a gzeira shava that says that whatever is usher in my family, I'll be usher in the corresponding erva in her family. So Mahu, just like the man, Kalosa Yasura, his daughter-in-law is usher. I'm going to say, Afi Name Kalosa Yasura. So also, regarding his wife's daughter-in-law, his stepdaughter-in-law, so his daughter-in-law should be usher. Umina, and then I would say 100%. Mahu Beskila, just like when a person has relations with his own daughter-in-law, he gets skila. Afiname beskila. Then you're going to have relations with. Then I would probably say that if you have relations with your stepdaughter-in-law, you'll also get skila. So that wouldn't make sense, because leman diyama skila chamura. If you want to say skila is the worst form of death penalty, then ikal michrach. I'll ask you a question on this whole gzeira shava. Malahu shekain imay beskila. When a person has relations with his own mother, so therefore he gets skila, right? You get skila if you have relations with your own mother. Because of that, therefore, if you have relations with your family, it's chomerdik. So therefore, if you have relations with your own daughter-in-law, that's why the Torah said you get skila. But taimebihi, would you say by relations that come through your wife's side? If you have relations with your wife's mother, it's not your mother, your wife's mother. She'ima besreifa, that you only get the sreifa penalty for your wife's mother. So maybe the Torah the Torah lessened the punishment when you have relations with your wife's mother than when you have relations with your own mother. So with your own mother, you get skila. With your wife's mother, you get sreifa. So it could be that the Torah went lenient and said that if you have relations with your wife's daughter-in-law, you will not get any punishment. That's one question. V'oid, bita b'sreifa v'chalosu b'skila. It doesn't make sense. If a person has relations with his stepdaughter, you get sreifa. The kalosa, but if you have relations with your stepdaughter-in-law, you're going to get beskila, a much worse of a punishment. That makes no sense. So the Gemara says that's not such a question. You can prove it by arroyus, by your own family, by a man's family. The bitoy b'sreifa. If you have relations with your own daughter, you get sreifa. The kalosei, but you have relations with your daughter-in-law, b'skila, you get skila. So that's not such a question. Ella, but the real question is, Mahu loichalakto bein imay lechalasai. Just like by him, you didn't make a difference between imay and chalasai. That just like you have relations with your mother, you get skila, so your daughter-in-law gets skila. Afhi, so also over here, loy tachlik ba, you shouldn't make a difference between imo lechalasa, between her mother and the kala, and therefore you should say that just like the mother gets, the mother would get sreifa, so also the daughter-in-law would get sreifa. So again, so you don't know what to give this person. You can give him sreifa or you can give him skila. So therefore, I don't know how to have this kal v'chayim. According to the opinion that sreifa is more difficult of a misa. So the first question is not a question because that was only according to the opinion skilas chamura. But the last question is a real good question. That if we're going to bring over a real gzeira shava and you apply it 100%, then you should say that just like by his family, you don't make a difference between imoy and kalasa; they both get skila. So also over here, like tachla ba bein imoy kalasa, you shouldn't make a difference, and that the kalasa over her should get sreifa. So on one hand, the gzeira shava says when you have relations with your stepdaughter-in-law, you should get skila. On one hand, it says you should get sreifa. Since you don't know what to do, you don't have this kal v'chayim. And according to the opinion that says you don't make a gzeir shav 100%, you actually bring one idea across, but you retrofit it to the place that you're bringing it to. So you're going to say like this: Mahu kalasa asura, afhi kalasa asura. You'll start off in saying that just like by his daughter-in-law is asur, so also her daughter-in-law is asur. And you retrofit it. Hasam hu beskila. Right away, you'll say that your own daughter-in-law, you get skila. But with her daughter-in-law, you'll give sreifa just like you find by her mother. So laman diyama skila chamura. But according to the opinion, skila is more severe. Ikal and mifrach. I will ask you a question. Malahu shekei imay beskila. The reason why a daughter-in-law is usher when it's your daughter-in-law, because you're usher on your own mother and you get skila with your own mother. But when you have relations with her mother, you only get sreifa. So it could be the Torah went lenient and said when you have relations with her daughter-in-law, you're not going to get anything. Just like over here by your relatives, there's a difference between your own daughter and your kala. Your own daughter, you get sreifa, and with your daughter-in-law, you get skila. Afhi, so also with her relatives, you should say that there's a difference between her daughter, which you would get sreifa, which you get sreifa, lechalasa, which you should get skila. So once again, I don't know what you should do with this lady, with her daughter-in-law. Do you give a skila or do you give a sreifa? So therefore, because I don't know what to do, I cannot say Yechayev anything for her daughter-in-law. From this question, from the last question, we don't make this Gezeira Shava. So basically, both Abaya, we're going to go on to a new topic. Both Abaya and Rava proved that if a person has relations with his wife's daughter-in-law, that means your stepson's wife, there's no Isser. The only Isser in the Torah is to have relations with your own daughter-in-law. Now the Gemara asks, how do I know that you're not allowed to have relations with your own daughter from a rape? Let's see the pasuk maybe inside. Over here, let's see if I have it up here. Okay. Here, the Torah says, right over here, if you could see it, the second pasuk over here, I'm going to bring it big. The Torah says, Ervas bas bincha, you're not allowed to have relations with your granddaughter, with your granddaughter from your son, or your granddaughter from your daughter. And that pasuk is talking about your son not through marriage, and your daughter not through marriage. So there, the Torah tells you can't have relations with the granddaughter. So how do you know your daughter not through marriage? Now, again, your daughter not through marriage means that the man raped somebody and they had a daughter. So there, the Torah didn't say anything about the daughter herself. What happens? How do you know you're Asa? Hamar Abaye said, Kal v'choyma al bas b'itoy anish. If the Torah made you gave you a punishment for having relations with your granddaughter, al b'itoy like kalshkein. Certainly on your daughter, you're going to get a punishment. So therefore, it's not such a question, even though the Torah didn't write it. Says Gemara, can you punish somebody just because you think it's a good idea? And says the Gemara, it's pretty obvious from the pasuk. Since the whole reason why your granddaughter is usher to you, it's because it's your daughter's daughter or your son's daughter. So certainly your daughter should be usher for you. Again, we're talking about it's not a daughter through marriage or not a granddaughter through marriage. It's through an anusa, a rape. But nevertheless, the Rabbi felt that it's enough. You don't need a pasuk to spell it out to you that you're not allowed to have relations with your own daughter from anusa. Rava said, Amalei Rabbi Yitzchak Bar Dine, Asya Heina, Heina, Asya Zima Zima. I don't even need that. I have a Gzeira Shava. A Gzeira Shava that says, here it says Heina, and it says Heina over here by Ervas Isha Bita Loiskalo, your stepdaughter, and here it says your stepdaughter. So therefore, if here it says clearly your stepdaughter, so this pasuk that says your granddaughter, it also means your daughter as well. And Zima Zima implies that from this Zima, we learn as if it says Zima by Ervas Bas Bincha, which means that there's going to be the Sreifa. Okay, so the Gemara says, okay, so now, Tana Avua B'Rav Oven, Lefi Shaloi Lamadnu Lebita Manu Sasai, Bita Hutzach Hakasav Loima Ubas Ish Koyen. Tana Avua B'Rav Oven had a new pasuk, and that pasuk is that the Torah tells you a bas ish kohen that does nus gets sreifa, gets the burn. That's the sreifa problem. So the Gemara says, why did the Torah write ubas ish kohen? So the Torah is telling you something else also, that any daughter of a man, even if it's through a nusa, is asa, and you get sreifa. So the Gemara says, then it should be like a bas kohen. Ima bas kohen he b'sreifa ein bayalal b'sreifa apita manusos he b'sreifa ve'ein bayalal b'sreifa. Let me ask you a question: when a person has relations with a bas kohen, she gets sreifa, but the bayal, the adulterer, he gets chenek. So let's say if a person has relations with his own daughter, he should not get the same misa of sreifa when you have your relations with your own daughter. Ubas ish, any daughter of a man that you have relations with, your own daughter, it should be very different. You should have a different type of punishment. Amar Abaye says, Amakra, the pasuk says, Asavihi machalaos. Misha chamalaos asavia, yatzu shavia machalala. Only a bas kohen, we differentiate that the boil doesn't get the same punishment as the bas ish kohen, because she gets punished with sreifa because she's shaming her father. But the boil is not shaming her father because the boil is not from the Kohen family. Only she's from the Kohen family. So she'll get sreifa, and the boil, the man, is going to get chenek. But here, it's her father being mechalel her. So not only is, if a father has relations with his own daughter, his daughter will get sreifa, and the father himself would also get the sreifa punishment. And Rava just says like this. Rava says, Bishlam Mahasim apikta medina bas koyim, like mina dina bas Yisrael. Rava says the whole thing doesn't make sense. Because a bas koyim, you can tell the boil that, look, you're not going to get sreifa, but we're going to give you like a regular bas Yisrael. You're mazana with a bas Yisrael, ashes ish, you get kanek. Hacha, over here, if the father is not going to get sreifa, adina the my slave, what other capital punishment are you going to give her? If his own daughter is going to get sreifa, what are you going to give her? Adina the punuyo mikbasla, you're going to let him go free, like as if he had relations with a lady that's not married, or it doesn't make sense. So clearly, the father gets sreifa, and the daughter will get sreifa. So the Gemara says like this: Azara lebitaman rasasim. How do you know you're not allowed to have relations with your own daughter? It seems that the pasuk that the basish koyin is a pasuk telling you that you get sreifa. But how do you know before the Torah can give you the punishment? The Torah has to say, don't have relations with your bitoy ma'anu sasa. So Bishlam Abaye Rava hate with the nafkele oynish masim nafkele azara. Abaye Rava will use the pasuk that says clearly. The pasuk says ervas das pincha bas pitcha loisagal ervas kivas kena. That pasuk teaches you don't do znus with your daughter and granddaughter. And if you're going to do, we're going to have a Gzeira Shava, you're going to get sreifa. Fine, that's one pasuk. But the Tana Avua the Rabbavan Mai, according to the Tana Avua the Rabbavan, where do we see the punishment, the azhara, the Torah warning you, don't have relations with your own daughter. A person should not don't do znus with your own daughter. Don't profane your own daughter by making her do znus. So probably it means don't do znus with your own daughter, even if it's not the daughter through marriage. So Maskiv Rav Yaakov, Achud Rav Achabar Yaakov, Hi al techalas bitchalas nois lahachiyuda. So it's coming to tell you that you shouldn't have relations with your own daughter. Hi mibayah leilekatanya. I need it for something else. Al techalas bitchalas noisa means yachol b'koyin amasis bite lelevi v'yisrael akasam medavo. Talmud Loimel has noisa b'chilish beznus akasam medavo. B'moisa es bite shloi l'shem ishus. Because what the Torah is telling you, that don't give your daughter over to do znus with anybody. But if you're a Bas Kohen, you're allowed to you give your daughter over to a Levi or Yisrael, even though you're defiling her from eating truma. But still, that's not znus. So maybe that's what the Torah is teaching you. That the Torah only had a problem if you give your daughter over to znus, to a strange guy. But how do you know that the Torah is also telling you that don't do znus with your own daughter? So the Gemara says, and came, Leimakra al tochel, my al techalel. Why does the Torah add an extra lamed? Shmami notarti, you see two things. One, that don't do znus with your own daughter. And number two is that the Torah has a problem with having your daughter enter a relationship that has nothing to do with marriage. But Torah has no problem if you're a Bas Kohen to marry her off to a Levi or Yisrael. Here is an interesting Gemara. What do they do with this pasuk al tchalas bitcha las noisa? Amar Rabmani said, don't make your daughter do znus. How is it a way a person makes his daughter do znus? Zehamati is bite lezake. A person gives his daughter over to, let's say, an old man. An old man, let's say a rich old man, and he makes his daughter marry that rich old man. Because the daughter is not going to be satisfied in an intimate relation with that old man, and he's causing his daughter to be in a relationship that's going to lead to znus. Like we learned in the Brisa, if you marry your daughter off to an old man, Rabbi Kiva says, a person who doesn't marry his daughter off, he leaves her to become an adult in his house and doesn't marry her off when she's young. Now, why would a person do that? Because a person, maybe he can't afford a maid, and therefore he has a daughter, and she's an older daughter. He doesn't want her to get married so she could forever serve him. When you're holding your daughter back from getting married, then that's leading her to znus, to immorality. And that's what the Gemara says. Amar Rav Kahana Mishum Rabbi Kiva. Ein lecho onim b'Yisrael al Rasha Arim v'Hamashes bite b'Geres. Ata Mashes bite b'Geres lav Arsha Ramhu. A Rasha who is shrewd is somebody who leaves his daughter and doesn't marry her off. He always gives an excuse why he's not letting his daughter go out. And Amar Abai explained what Rabbi Kiva meant. We go to Amid Beis. Hachi Kamar. This is what Rabbi Kiva meant. Ezehu Rasha Arim. Who is a shrewd Rasha? Ani. He's a poor person. So what makes him shrewd? He says, "Oh, I'm not ready to marry my daughter off." Zehamasha Bita Begaris. He leaves his daughter as an old maid. In other words, because he doesn't want her to get married, so that he can have an extra, maid in his house or somebody to help out. And that's a Rasha, because he's causing his daughter to eventually lead a life of immorality. The Amar Rav Kahana Mishum Rabbi Akiva. Rav Kahana said in the name of Rabbi Akiva, have a zoyer, be always careful, bin haye'etzcha lefi darkai. A person who has a self-interest when he's giving you advice. When someone is giving you advice, you have to put in your mind, perhaps that the person's giving you advice has some self-interest. And because of that, this may not be good advice. So you should evaluate it accordingly. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav Yehuda said in the name of Rav, Hamasi is bita lezakin, someone who marries his old daughter off to an old rich guy. V'hamasi isha levnei katan, or he says to his young son, who's let's say 8 years old, marry this older woman. V'hamachse aveda legoy, somebody who finds a lost object that belonging to a guy and returns it. All of Akasav, I mean, the pasuk says in this person, the man's voice aravas tbeiva liyev Hashem shleich loy. A person Hashem is not going to forgive him because you're causing znus to be in the world. First of all, again, when you're marrying your daughter off to an old guy, they're not going to be satisfied intimately. And same thing with a woman marrying your small son. And a machsa aveda legoy, you're not supposed to return a lost object to a guy. You think you're doing right, but the Torah doesn't want you to return, be so nice to a guy. And therefore, Hashem says, Hashem will not forgive you if you do that. Meisabei, Gemara asks a question, someone who loves his wife like his own body. In other words, has a lot of compassion to his wife. When it comes to spending money, he spends more on his wife than himself. Who leads his children along the right path of Yerushalayim. You marry your children off while they're still young. So then, all of you're doing a good thing. So what do we see from this brisa? That it's good to marry your son when he's very young. So how do you say that whoever is marrying his young son to an older woman is doing a bad thing? And says the Gemara, if you marry your son when he's close to, let's say becoming bar mitzvah, so when you're marrying him off at 12 years old, it's not going to lead to znus. But if you marry your son to an older woman, let's say your 6-year-old son to a 17-year-old woman, so then it could lead to znus because she's not going to have intimacy with him. And because of that, that's a very bad avera. Tana Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, if someone loves his neighbors, or he's close to his relatives, or he marries his niece, and he lends a poor person money when he could really use it, even though you're thinking maybe I shouldn't because he's not going to be able to pay me back. When you daven, Hashem is going to answer you if you do all these things. Tana Rabbanan, new Gemara, the pasuk said by the Isha, the Tarsh says right over here, the Isha, that's Ima Zimahi. If you take your mother or your mother-in-law, you married a woman, you take her mother, which is your mother-in-law, Zimahi. You did znus, be'esh yisrafu. You're going to go into the fire. You had znus with your mother-in-law. Oisai, the man himself, the eshen and them. Now the eshen makes no sense because eshen means, but what did your wife do wrong? I can understand your mother-in-law should get sreifa, but what did your wife do wrong? So the Gemara darshans oisev is achas man. Tivri Rabbi Shmuel, Rabbi Kiva oisev eshtehem. Rabbi Kiva says 2 people get znus. 2 people go into the fire over here. My benayu. What's the difference between the Rabbi Kiva and Rabbi Shmuel? How do they explain it? Amar Abaya said, we'll stop in a minute. Mashmor's darshim ika benayu. They had a question on how to darshan that pasuk. Rabbi Shmuel Sava Oisei the Eshen. Eshen doesn't mean both of them, because Oisei there's achas mehem. Oisei means he gets the sreifa, and one of the women gets sreifa, either your wife or your mother-in-law. So it's obviously your mother-in-law. Shekaim belashon yavani karin achas heina. The word hen is another way to say one of them. So that's what Rabbi Shmuel says. That's how you read the pasuk. The ein chamoisim midrash asi, and the Torah is not talking about your mother-in-law's mother. That, it's from a drasha. It's not written in the Torah about having relations with your mother-in-law's mother. Comes along Rabbi Akiva, and he says that's what the pasuk is telling you. Rabbi Akiva holds oisei ve'eshem, means 2 people get znus. If a person had relations with his mother-in-law and his mother-in-law's mother, then you get sreifa. Either one. Oisei ve'shtein. For him, he gets the sreifa, v'shteim, both of them, his mother-in-law and his mother-in-law's mother. This is the pasuk that says you're not allowed to have relations with your mother-in-law's mother. That's one way to learn the machlekes between Shmuel and Kiva. And finally, Rava says, then the pasuk is dealing with another question. The pasuk is dealing with what happens after your wife died. Are you still usher on your mother-in-law? If you have relations with your mother-in-law after the death of your wife, you get sreifa. The eshen, she still remains your mother-in-law. Rabbi Kiva Sava is sur ba'alma, is only an isser but not a sreifa. And he learns, oisei das head means both of them have to be alive in order for you to get sreifa on your mother-in-law. But if your wife dies, then you don't get sreifa for relations with your mother-in-law. According to Rabbi Kiva, it's just an Isser Ba'alma. Okay, so Be'ez Hashem, tomorrow we'll start from the Mishnah and we'll do some catch-up.
Sure, thank you.